We've been a bellwether on a number of issues, and climate change is one of those more recently. So we're recognizing that we're experiencing climate impacts already. We're seeing sea level rise already, it's measurable. We're seeing a decrease in snowpack. We're seeing extreme heat, and we're going on our 4th year of drought. There's been a convergence of public support, and there's been a political leadership as well that has been built up. So we actually started as a state commission under our current governor, Jerry Brown, when he was previously governor in the late 70s, and it was set up to work with local elected officials across the state to develop clean energy strategies. So he appointed a number of leading local policymakers, and they worked together to develop energy efficiency policies and programs and renewable energy policies and programs as well, with the idea that they would provide a menu of options that other cities and counties could choose from to advance clean energy initiatives. So when his administration ended, we formed a nonprofit. That nonprofit has been around for 35 years now, and we've expanded our work to water conservation, to community design, transportation and land use, health, and working very much now on climate change mitigation and adaptation as a huge concern.
So that's interesting. It was started in the 1970s. When it was first established, what were some of the key issues that they were exploring? And have those issues changed over time, or have they just intensified?
They've evolved, and I think we've seen a little bit of both. So at the time, energy, obviously as our founding issue, it's still very much an important issue for the state. Some of the other issues, we worked a lot on waste diversion, we worked on recycling. We've been able to see that result in state legislation that really took those progressive local initiatives to scale. And we've seen that on climate change as well. So that's kind of been our theory. You work at the local level where it's easier to have an influence, it's smaller, you can pilot policies, you can pilot initiatives, and once there's enough momentum behind it, then you can pass state legislation which influences policy across the state. You know, we had a number of mayors signing on to the U.S. Cool Mayors Climate Protection Agreements. We started to see some momentum, and in 2006, the governor at that time, Governor Schwarzenegger, signed AB 32, the Global Warming Solutions Act. And so what that did was set a target for reducing emissions to 1990 levels by 2020. So that was about a 15% reduction. Since then, our current governor, Governor Brown, has put out an executive order that would actually provide further reductions, 40% by 2030 and 80% by 2050. So we have very, very ambitious climate targets. And that provides an environment that supports green businesses. It helps us think about how we can act locally around that impetus to reduce emissions. And it also, through a cap and trade program, it creates a cap on our most polluting industries, and that revenue for those that can't meet that cap, they buy allocations from others who can, and that revenue goes into funding programs. So we currently, through this fiscal year, have over $2.2 billion that will go directly into climate initiatives. So that could be plug-in electric vehicles, that could be low-carbon transit options. We have a lot of affordable housing and transit-oriented development that can go into. So it's providing us a way to realize this carbon-friendly, carbon-neutral future that we're looking towards as a state.
Would you say that many Californians, with the droughts occurring, seeing these measurable impacts, do you think that allowed people to really make this idea tangible, or do you think that it was more about education and a sustained conversation through the media and local leaders?
I think it's both. I think people are definitely seen tangible impacts. People can talk about changing crop patterns, changing weather, and how you have to change your agricultural practices. Whether they're calling it climate change or not, they're recognizing that they're having to make different decisions. Everybody's experiencing this. Everyone knows the drought's happening. It's something that the state has done campaigns around. It's something, and we hear it in the media pretty much every day. And if it's not the drought, it's the related impacts. It's the potential for wildfires. We are already experiencing a higher wildfire season than we've seen. We've had more fires at this time of year than last year. So these are the types of impacts that we start to have to face. Flooding, that's the next big thing that we're going to have to deal with. So if we do get an El Nino year, then we're worried about flood. These are the things that are on people's minds right now. And it's causing them to push their policymakers to act.
Your organization really focuses on the local level to help people build these practices into their lives. Tell us a little bit about the Climate Readiness Collaborative and how that empowers people to live a more sustainable life.
Sure. So we're a part of a number of regional collaboratives that are looking at adaptation. The Capital Region Climate Readiness Collaborative is one in the Sacramento region. It's a part of a larger group called ARCA, the Alliance for Regional Collaboratives for Climate Adaptation. It includes the San Diego region, LA, the Bay Area, Sacramento area, and also the Sierra Nevada region. And these regions are coming together and saying, we're already experiencing impacts of climate change and we need to act now. So bringing folks together through this collaborative, we've been able to share best practices and have a real-time peer learning network. This is a new field, adapting to climate change, and so there are some models out there, but we're kind of all inventing it together as we go. And so it helps to be able to connect to other like-minded people dealing with this. For the first time, we conducted an adaptation forum here in the state, coming off of a national forum, and we were able to bring over 800 people together. So people are really concerned in California about not just reducing our impacts and reducing our emissions, but also responding to the impacts that we're already facing. So we had a number of state agencies, we had a number of local practitioners who came together really trying to figure out what are we going to do to make our communities more resilient. Coming out of that, we've seen a lot of local action, and we've seen an executive order, the one I previously mentioned related to mitigation. It also called out adaptation, and it asked each of the state agencies to develop a plan for implementing the state's adaptation strategy. So we're starting to see more of a recognition at the state level as well that adaptation and mitigation, these go hand in hand. We're not giving up on our very ambitious goals to reduce pollution, but we are also realizing that there's so much pollution that we're going to see impacts either way. So we also need to respond to those impacts. We also have a national conference, the New Partners for Smart Growth Conference. This conference attracts over 1,200 people. It moves around the nation. We do it in partnership with the Environmental Protection Agency, and it's really exciting to see. It's hard to work on an issue like climate change. I get asked all the time, how do you remain hopeful? How are you not depressed every single day? And really that's the answer for me is we're bringing together over 1,200 people once a year that are some of the brightest minds and leading practitioners working on these issues, and I see the solutions they're coming up with, and I think there's hope. It's pretty amazing what's happening right now, and it's in the public sector with the progressive policies, but it's also in the private sector. And I think the sweet spot will be when we can leverage both of those and connect those. So just one example that comes to mind is the city of Lancaster. It's a pretty progressive community down in Southern California. And the mayor there, a very conservative mayor, has made climate change his issue, and he wants to become the first carbon neutral community. He's streamlining solar so you can get it over the counter. He's requiring solar on new single family homes, and he's working with businesses to advance green jobs. he's getting kudos for being very business friendly at the same time as he's getting kudos from the environmental world. And so how do we find those solutions? I think that's really where the sweet spot is. We see all these innovations around shared mobility. There's Lyft, there's Uber, there's all these companies coming in, and they're finding a way without public investment to reduce car use. Susan Shaheen out of UC Berkeley is already showing that it's reducing the number of vehicles that people have, that it's reducing DUIs, that it's having all these other community and environmental benefits. So with some concerted public partnerships that are first mile, last mile type approaches, or micro-transit or shared carpooling, we can really, I think, make a difference in our resiliency and in the fight against climate change.
Tell us a little bit about the CivicSpark project.
So CivicSpark is another project that gives me a lot of hope about our future communities and our ability to become more resilient. We started this project last year. It's a governor's initiative that we're working with the Governor's Office of Planning and Research on. It's an AmeriCorps program that builds capacity for local governments to work on climate change. So it's taking these passionate, very well-educated, recent college graduates and providing them an opportunity to get on-the-ground experience working with local governments on tangible projects related to climate change mitigation. So we have 48 members across the state of California working on almost 100 projects, everything from an iCommute project in San Diego to communities, teams that are working on energy audits and energy efficiency measures. These people are already helping save millions in conservation related to water and energy, and it hasn't been even a full year of this program. So it's just really exciting to see those next generation of leaders and be able to have them be connected with public policy, with local government in ways that are very tangible, where they can contribute to real actions to prevent climate change.
Yeah, that really is amazing. When you get out of school, you have student debts to pay off. People are often kind of forced to just find a job. And, the kind of work that you do often leads you down a certain path. So how does this project help young people, but also how did it come to be? Like, where is this money and these resources coming from?
The resources for this program come from the Corporation for National and Community Service. So it's a federal agency that does AmeriCorps service programs. There's an opportunity for governors to pick one initiative that they think is really important, and our governor picked this one because he's very committed to climate change. And so that provides the seed funding to provide support through the members to local governments. So they're getting subsidized support. The AmeriCorps members, the CivicSpark members, they're getting on-the-job experience. They're getting a stipend so that they have some of their living costs covered to be able to do it. So it's a great win-win where local governments who have been hit really hard by the recession, have been asked to do more related to climate change but don't have the resources to do it, now have the support from these really passionate, engaged CivicSpark members who are getting an entry point. The other thing that is an exciting component of this program is we're utilizing a service called Encore, which is like the AmeriCorps program. It's a service program, but it's for retired professionals, so it's at the other end of your career. So we have these Encore supervisors supervising a team of people right out of college. So you get this intergenerational learning as well. You have the mentorship, you have the deep level of experience and the savvy of going through the political system and having a lot of experience in that. And you have people coming in with fresh ideas and a new perspective and a lot of passion for these issues that are trained in the areas that we're addressing. It's a new field, so there weren't programs based on addressing climate change before, and we're starting to see more of that. Young folks can bring a lot to the table related to the intersection with technology. they grew up in a different environment where technology was a very organic part of any solutions that would come up.
For you, what is the value of working in a field and dedicating the productive part of your life towards services and projects that you believe in, rather than just doing a job?
Mm-hmm. I grew up in the San Joaquin Valley in a small town called Visalia with a little over 120,000 people. It's very polluted. It's one of the highest rates for respiratory-related issues in addition to obesity and diabetes. And so I'm very passionate about finding solutions to improve communities that enhance quality of life rather than being about sacrifice. You know, where I grew up, you drove. I mean, it was just not accessible. It's still not for most people to take a bus, to ride or bike as a transportation mode. But having lived in other places where that's an easy, accessible, healthy, convenient choice, you know, I would love to see more of that in towns like where I grew up. And knowing that that is one of the solutions to the air quality issue, to the health issues, and it also is going to improve our environment, to me, that's what it's all about.
For you, what are some of the areas that still need to be addressed and perfected, particularly with respect to the type of energy that's being generated?
A lot of local governments are looking at having more control over the supply of their energy. So a lot of them are looking to form community choice aggregations, CCAs. Property assessed clean energy is another big thing here. You pay off the projects through the savings, basically. So it's seen as a great market from the private sector as well. The opportunity is how do local governments work with the private sector players to really take advantage of that market momentum to optimize community benefits.
Could you tell us what types of energy exist? Is there like coal, nuclear, you know, maybe what percentage is green?
Sure. So our energy in California is very green. We have a renewable portfolio standard that has required the utilities to meet 33% renewable energy. That has been increased to, I believe, yes, it is 50% renewables by 2030 through the recent governor's executive order. So renewables is a big part of our energy strategy here, which it also influences the other things that we're looking at. So we're looking at plug-in electric vehicles and fuel switching to move more towards electricity, since our electricity is coming from renewable energy.
Basically, when you look at the economy and the way business works, you know, if you're in on a booming industry on the ground floor, you can see the most significant returns. How does California view their long-term economic future when it comes to green energy, and what are some of the ways by which they're encouraging this to go forward?
California is very focused on creating green jobs as part of their environmental initiatives. So it's both, what is the impact of these regulations on jobs, and also how do we train up a workforce, and how do we assure that there's industries being built around these opportunities. And so, certainly there will be some jobs that are lost. It's not about not changing, it's about how do we make sure that we continue to be a viable and strong and prosperous economy. Through the regulatory environment, through the legislative environment, we're sending the message that we're open for green jobs and that there's going to be a consistent and supportive environment in the state. And that's through incentives, that's through, locally streamlining permitting or helping to develop business incubators, modeling some of the technology at public facilities. Those are some of the things that we're trying to do.
Have organizations such as yours or others taken into consideration population growth and the amount of people that can sustainably live in the area?
Well, I know the Governor's Office of Planning and Research has been very focused on what do we do as our population grows so dramatically. That is really where the land use and growth strategies come into play, and that's where the local government commission and the work with the policymakers that are part of our network is really important, because at the local level, that's where those decisions are made. So we've been really trying to focus our growth on existing areas. There's a piece of legislation that was passed in 2008 called SB 375, and that set targets for the major regions across the state related to vehicle miles traveled. So the strategy is, how do you grow? Where do you put that growth and development, and the connection to housing and development and transportation? And so that's being done by focusing the growth where there's transit, where there's already existing infrastructure, so that people have the option to take light rail, to take bus, to bike or walk, or drive shorter distances.
Is the federal government really taking note of these kinds of examples that are being set here in California? And are there any kinds of discussions that are happening on that legislative level rather than, the subsection organizations? Or is there still more inroads that need to be made and more conversations that need to happen so that this example can really shine on the national scale?
Yes and yes. Yes, the federal government is paying attention to what California and other states are doing, and yes, there is more conversation that needs to happen to really show the leadership we need. The president has done a number of things through the administration, through his agencies, to address climate change. So the Clean Power Plan looks at reducing emissions from some of the biggest polluters. There are a number of other initiatives working with local governments and tribal entities across the nation to address climate change. It's a political battle right now, and that's what it comes down to. And especially in California, if we develop those really progressive models that work at the local level, that can build momentum towards state leadership, and then we set a model from California of what can be done nationally, we hope, as well. So we're hoping, leading up to the Conference of Parties in Paris, that there will be more leadership that is shown. We're doing our part. We have a number of local leaders in our network that go out to the Conference of Parties and advocate for the role of local governments, for the importance of subnational agreements, and really try and push for more of national leadership as well.
Kate, thank you so much for taking the time with us, and more importantly, for the work that you and your organization are doing.
Well, thank you for doing this documentary. It's an important topic, so I appreciate it.